Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Welcome, depending on what part of the world you're in. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Maria Volpe. I'm a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, where I also run the dispute resolution program. These roundtable breakfasts are co-sponsored by the Association for Conflict Resolution of Greater New York and the City University of New York Dispute Resolution Center at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. I started these breakfasts after 9/11, and until March 2020, we met in person at John Jay. Since April 2020, since the pandemic, we have been meeting online. Today is our 260th breakfast since 9/11. All of these breakfasts since April 2020 are recorded, and the recordings are posted on two websites, the ACR-GNY website and the CUNY Dispute Resolution Center website. We'll put both of those websites in the chat. You can view all of them. They're all posted now since April 2020. These breakfasts are put together each month by a wonderful team that I work with: Julie Denny, Matthew Latimer, Nikki Borofsky, Emily Skinner, and Chloe Choi. We are so delighted this morning to have with us colleagues from Dayton, Ohio, where they are literally forging new ground, mediators who are working with the police department and respond to 911 calls. Who would have thought that in the distant past that mediators would be taking on this magnificent role? I'm particularly delighted to have Cherise with us. I've known Cherise for decades now, and it's a thrill to have you with us this morning, Cherise. And Raven, welcome to this group. Before we move on to them, Julie Denny is going to more formally introduce them. Julie, take it away.
Thanks, Maria. Cherise Hairston, sorry, Cherise, is a certified transformative mediator with the Institute for the Study of Conflict Transformation. She's also a certified professional coach with the Coactive Training Institute, the International Coaching Federation, and a certified positive intelligence mental fitness coach with Positive Intelligence, Inc. She's a 2018 recipient of the City of Dayton Joseph T. Klein Award. She's a fellow with the Institute of Conflict Transformation, an elder board of directors with the National Association for Community Mediation, and she's an adjunct faculty member with the Jimmy and Rosalind Carter School of Peace and Conflict Resolution at George Mason University. She has a ton of experience and a very long resume. Raven Cruz Loaiza is also at the Dayton Mediation Center, part of the team there, and she's the Mediation Response Coordinator for the newly developed Mediation Response Unit, which we're going to hear about today. Raven came to the center with a lot of knowledge and experience, and she used to be director of a rape crisis and anti-human trafficking department with a victim services agency in Northwest Ohio. She knows a lot about relationship building, community development, program development, and she paved the way to develop multiple rape crises centers throughout Ohio. She also developed and managed several anti-human trafficking coalition chapters. Again, her resume goes on and on. The truth of the matter is we want to hear more about you all and your program, so I'm going to turn it over to the two of you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Maria. I'm Cherise. Raven, you get your voice in there.
It's me. I'm over here. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. Well, we're thrilled to be here, and what I hope to do is kind of set the context of who we are as a community mediation center, set that context, a little bit of our history, and then I'm going to turn it over to Raven because we really want to hear what Raven has to say, and I love listening to her every day and all day. But first, Maria, gosh, I love you. Maria is probably, I've known you since the very first conference I went to in 1999, and I think it was the NCPCR. I don't remember what that acronym stand for, but I'm sure I went to an ACR conference as well.
NCPCR was the National Conference on Peacemaking and Conflict Resolution.
Yes, yes, yes. Honor to all those wonderful folks who had that organization going. And that was in 1999. So it's just a pleasure. Maria, you've been a thread throughout my career and someone I could always just reach out to, and you would return a call or an email and help me along the way. So I love that you're here, and we appreciate the invite. And then I do want to do a shout out to Jody Miller, who I think is on the call, my colleague Jody Miller at the Institute for the Study of Conflict Transformation. I've known Jody probably as long too. So I just want to do a shout out.
Hey, Cherise.
Hey, Jody. So a little bit about the Dayton Mediation Center. So I do want to set that context. As Julie gave you a little bit of my background, I've been in the field for 27 years in conflict resolution. I started my master's in conflict resolution in 1996 at Antioch University. And so I've been able to see this kind of arc of the field since the mid 1990s. And it's amazing where both our collective field has gone and where we're headed in our work with AI and with Zoom, and just opening up so many different ways that we can do this work. And so you'll be hearing about how we do this work. But to give you a little bit of context, we're a very unique community mediation center. Most mediation centers are nonprofit. We are a mix of things. We actually are part of the City of Dayton local government. So as I like to say, your city tax dollars pay for water, trash, fire, police, and mediation services. So we've been located in the City of Dayton since our inception in 1987. And the reason that we became is because one of the civil servants in the Department of Planning and Community Development, we had a division called the Citizen Participation Division. And that Citizen Participation Division was the link between community members and their needs and concerns in the neighborhood. And so the division manager at the time happened to go to a conference and learned about the community board's mediation program in San Francisco. And she said, we need that here in Dayton. And so we partnered with Wright State University to create a community mediation center and to offer mediation to the community. And since 1987, and we used to be in one room, one room. Actually, I don't think we even had a room. I think we were in a room with people and we had a little cubicle. And that's how we started in one of the priority boards. And so now we have a very large team of professionally paid mediators and conflict intervention specialists. We continue to be part of City of Dayton. We're in the planning, neighborhood, and development department, and we are now our own division. We struggled for a very long time to survive financially, so we do get some of our funding from city tax dollars. Traditionally, that's always been a quarter of our budget, and we've hustled and earned the rest. So one of our longtime partners is the Montgomery County Juvenile Court. They've been one of our longest partners, and they're really responsible for the majority of mediation types that we do. Prior to the pandemic, we did anywhere from 800 mediations a year, and we intervened in probably 200 plus more conflict types. And so our range of services, we certainly started out doing mediations as a community center, but we now do a range of services, including conflict coaching, conflict intervention training. We do facilitation. I principally work in organizations doing team development around communication and conflict management. And now we have added another facet to our work. So it's a little bit of kind of the background of who we are. I want to give a shout out to our director, Michelle Zaremba. I'm sure many of you have heard her name and or mentioned, and I think Dan mentioned, I was listening in a little bit before we got started. You know, our philosophy as a community mediation center is for other community mediation centers, we want to help build capacity. So we really love doing that. We started out in 1987, and we NAFCM, National Association for Community Mediation, began in 1994. We joined right away. So we've been a member of the National Association for Community Mediation, NAFCM, since its inception in 1994. I bring that in because at our heart, at the core of what we do is community mediation. And as you know, for all of you who have been connected to a community mediation center, that's where most of us cut our teeth. Certainly there are a good number of court connected programs, but most practitioners of my generation from the 80s and 90s and all of the academics that have written books like Maria and do all our fabulous research, most of us have cut our teeth in community mediation, where you literally learn the skill of mediation and the philosophy. And community mediation, the hallmarks of community mediation are all about grassroots, bottom up, not top down, voice and choice, self-determination, voluntariness, the confidentiality, but also the accessibility of services. And so offering these services to the community members at no cost or low cost is really what community mediation has been about. And that's really who we are. We are a community-based mediation center. You'll hear about, as soon as I turn it over to Raven, you'll hear about the unique application of community mediation out in the community. But what I would say is that we've been going out into the community all along. We're just doing it differently and more potently and more, what I would say, in a stronger way. One of my favorite mediations was literally at the neighbor's house, and they were arguing over not only their property line, but the bushes along the property line. And one of the participants was elderly and didn't drive. So I got in my car and went to their house, and they agreed to do their mediation outside over the bushes. And what was funny about that one is, as I drove up, she was trimming the bushes, and she had her manual trimmers in her hand. And so she kept those in her hand, and they just, you know, did my introduction, got them going, and she kept trimming. And when she would get upset about what her neighbor was saying, she'd start aiming those clippers a little bit too close to him. And I got worried every now and again. I'd come in and do an intervention, and she'd go back down to trimming those bushes. And so we've always gone to where the people needed us to go. But we all know the value of a neutral place. And so having a center where people could come has really always been part of what we do. We go to people, they come to us. And of course, as most of you know, community mediation centers, we survive and thrive through volunteers. And so we've been fortunate to have anywhere from 60 to 80 active volunteers at one time. And so we do this work with our volunteers. So that's a little bit about kind of who we are. The last thing that I'll say before I turn it over to Raven, so that you can hear her wonderfulness of what she's helped us create is when we joined, we started out like most mediation centers. We were practicing mediation as we understood it and received. And when we joined NAVCOM, we really wanted to be in alignment with the values of community mediation, with the hallmarks of community mediation, that kind of bottom up, not top down. The people are the experts for their situation. They don't necessarily need me to come in as an expert. They just need support as they talk about their situation, which is really personal and which is distressing. And so for us, that really has shaped everything that we do and how we do it. So when we learned about transformative mediation and we saw kind of the values that underline transformative in terms of self-determination, voice and choice, bottom up, grassroots, really helping people overcome the hard crisis that happens when we experience conflict, there was an alignment there for our values for Community Mediation Center and how we practice this thing called Community Mediation Center. And so as a result, we had a chance to meet some of the folks interested in transformative mediation. Brooke and Joe have been mentors of ours since 2000. And we consider ourselves rooted in transformative. And that really, I think, helps shape not only transformative values and principles, but community mediation principles. And that really has helped us really develop an adaptability and a flexibility to what we do. And it's a natural, I think, evolution for us to be expanding our services from mediation to doing conflict coaching, to doing team development and facilitation and a range of services. And I think that that's really what's helped us survive for more than 35 years doing this work. And so with that, that's just a little bit of the context of who we are. We are community mediation through and through. Power to the people is really what we do. And we really help people have a way to figure out what they want to do. And that's really important to us as a community-based mediation center. With that, what I want to say about Raven is we're so very fortunate to have someone of her heart and her passion for people and for helping. And she has been central to helping us create our alternative response, our mediation response unit. And we're so very fortunate to have her. I know she's why you're here. So I will turn it over to my lovely colleague, Raven.
Thank you, Ms. Cherise, and good morning to all of you beautiful people. Are you excited to learn something new today? Probably like, no, it's too early. I know I saw somebody said it's 5 a.m. where they're at. I'm so sorry that you got up at 5 a.m. to see my face, but excited that you are with us. You're welcome to throw questions in the chat. If you want to raise your hand. I know we have a couple people monitoring that because I kind of get tunnel vision when I'm talking about the mediation response unit. So if you have questions, let me know and we'll make it happen. So I'm going to start with a PowerPoint presentation. Can someone verbally, because now I can't see you, can someone verbally tell me if you see the screen?
Yes, we can see the screen and we hear you.
Perfect. This is great.
We are seeing the presenter.
Yeah, I'm trying to. There we go.
There you go.
Everybody good? All right, exciting. So I'm here to talk about the Mediation Response Unit, something that is new and happening across different alternative emergency response programs are happening across the nation, which is super exciting. So I'm going to give you a little bit of history, tell you a little bit how we operate, what we're doing in the community, and then answer any questions that you may have. Our unit formulated after the murder of George Floyd in 2020, and there were lots of police reform initiatives happening around the nation. Dayton, Ohio went a bit further than that, and they put some action and some money behind that. So it's really, really awesome to see how that transpired. And how that worked is they said, we need something to happen. So they put together this great plan, and they divided up into 5 different working groups. Each of those working groups focused on a different area. One of them focused on recruitment and retention and diversity with our local police department. Another one focused on use of force. There was body cams, and I'm going to forget the 5th one right now, so don't hate. And then there was a group that focused specifically on community engagement. That's the group that I'm going to focus on, because that's where the MRU, Mediation Response Unit, formulated from. So they developed 5 working groups, and each of those working groups consisted of a variety of people, from your everyday person in the community to community professionals to police to commissioners and anywhere and everywhere in between. So we really tried to get people from the community that would participate in this and offer their perspectives, their opinions and their feedback and such. So this working group for community engagement was developed, and there were 3 programs. There were actually, out of the entire police reform initiative for the city of Dayton, there were 142 recommendations for change with our local police department. Some of those, all of those are important. Some of those were smaller or minor policy changes. Some of them were, for example, now everyone's required to have a body cam, and there's a whole protocol for that. And then the community engagement group worked on 3 and had 3 ideas. One of those was to have a telephone reporting unit through the police department to eliminate some of those physical face-to-face interactions for lower things that could be taken over the phone, reports that can be taken over the phone. Then they wanted a crisis response unit specifically for mental health calls. And then they wanted an alternative emergency response system or unit. And that is where we forward. So we respond to low 911 and police calls for service for the city of Dayton. We work with, I'm excited. So this is our team currently. There are 7 of us. And we come from a diverse background, so we also reflect the populations that we serve, but we have folks with experience from juvenile probation, juvenile detention, victim services, children's services, mental health, like high acuity mental health interaction and services. I don't know if I said victim services, and then psychiatric care with youth and with adults. So we have a variety of different backgrounds with our team, which makes us very unique and diverse. So it's exciting to see that. The overall goals. So when they set this, they had this idea, hey, we want to do this alternative response. What are the goals? So there were 3 goals that were set out. Number 1 is to improve positive police community relations. Oftentimes, there are lots of folks that have interaction with police, but they're not positive, or it's only when something is going wrong and not when things are just there or things are going right. So improving those positive police community contacts. In addition, we wanted to provide an alternative to policing for those lower emergent calls. Specifically, this was designed to reach our marginalized populations, and most specifically, our Black, Brown, and immigrant populations. And then the third goal of the program was to reduce the overall number of repeated 911 and police calls for certain aspects. So those were the 3 goals that were set out when this program was in creation and development. So the question there, and just to back it up a little bit, there are lots of programs across the United States in which there are co-response. There are police and social workers, police and practitioners, police, EMTs and paraprofessionals, police and citizens, and there's various makeups of those types of programs across the United States. Some have been around for 20, 30 years. Some of them are very new. And since all of the challenges that we've been having with in the nation, there's been conversations, and more people in more cities across the nation are developing very similar programs. So when we respond, and I'm going to list there's a few of these calls that are listed on here, and we've actually expanded those. So the unique piece about the MRU is that we do not co-respond. We're not riding with police. We're not going to the scene with police. We're responding strictly on our own. And we do operate, the other unique piece about that is that we do operate on the same computer and radio system as our local police department. So we have that open communication. And when I get into how we take calls, I'll explain a little bit more about that. But we also, the unique piece about our program is that we're mediation based. So we are a community, as Ms. Cherise mentioned, we're a community mediation center. We assist in a variety of different realms in regards to conflict, and we utilize a transformative conflict theory for that. So that's the uniqueness about our program, is that we do not co-respond, and we are on the same police and computer and radio system, and that we're mediation based as opposed to anything else. And also other programs are very specific for behavior or mental health types of calls, and that for our program, that's not our primary focus. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a few. So you're probably wondering, what in the world kind of calls are best fit for mediation? And how do we differentiate between whether it should go to mediation or the police? So I'm glad you asked. We have a variety of different call types. Let me click through these real quick. So when is it fit for us? Really, we're talking about anything that involves people in conflict or quality of life issues, but not weapons. We are unarmed. If you see over here in the left, our mediators, we wear maroon shirts and black pants. We have coats, our vehicles and everything says mediator on it, both our polo shirts as well as outer garments, so we're very well identifiable. Our vehicles, if you go over here, it says Dayton Mediation Center, and you'll see another vehicle here in just a couple of minutes, and it says Mediation Response Unit. I get a chuckle sometimes when you pull up on a scene and people are like, medication, I don't want any medication. And you're kind of dumbfounded, like, what? Oh, they're reading it wrong. Or they'll say, I don't want to meditate. Oh no, it's not the meditation unit, mediation. And so sometimes we use different lingo depending on the folks that we're working with. So things like noise complaints, animal complaints, the barking dog, parking complaints, the neighbors parking in my yard, the neighbors more than 12 inches from my driveway and I can't get out. Anything to do with loitering, begging, panhandling, trespassing, things that involve juveniles, because we really try to keep our juveniles out of any system, not just the justice system, but any system. So we really focus and hone in on those juvenile disturbances, which also includes group homes. And I'll talk about that here in a few. Any conflict with neighbors, neighborhoods, roommates, people in conflict, disorderly subjects, calls for peace officers. My ex and I separated and I need to pick up belongings, but I don't really feel too safe and I'm not sure what'll go down. So I want someone to accompany me, those types of things. Child custody exchanges. Who wants the police involved in a negative, if the caregivers can't get along and they're always arguing and they're showing up and they need police that's never a good thing for our children to be exposed to. So why not use an alternative for that and keep the police for the other things? Of course, if there's any violence, history of extreme violence or aggression, if there's a weapon present, if there's a major injury, minor injuries, we're all CPR and first aid certified, so we can attend to those smaller things. But if it's a larger injury or something, that would require medics or police. And if we get on scene and things go south, we have the ability to transfer it back to police. We don't get in the habit of doing that. Or if there's been a higher level crime that has been committed. So there's lots of crime that happens, but not everything, especially if you work in a bigger city, not everything gets reported or investigated or things like that. So it depends on what type of crime. If it's a felony level crime, that would not be fit for us. But if it's something like criminal damaging or trespassing or acting the disorderly subject type of thing, those are things that we can do. So when we first began, they took a look at the average calls per week under these particular categories, and the research shows that about 54% of those calls would be appropriate for the Mediation Response Unit. And here you can see the vehicle with the Mediation Response Unit label there on the side. So there was lots of research that came into what kind of calls are we going to take? What's safe? What's not safe? What would have the most impact? What would prevent those repeat callers? What would really hone in on the underlying challenges as opposed to just the symptom that has surfaced? Some of the benefits of having an alternative emergency response unit, aka the MRO, up here and then I'll talk about them. So for the community, you're going to get a better fit for those nonviolent disputes. As I mentioned before, mediation can address some of those underlying conflicts. If you're familiar with the iceberg effect, they're calling about this, but when you get there, there's 7 years or 3 weeks or 14 hours of other challenges that are the root causes of what the person has called about. So we really hone in and focus on the root causes of that conflict so that we can prevent repeat calling. We also take more time. So the average police officer, when they're on scene, they're coming in, this is the problem, let's figure it out and let's move on to the next call because there's so many calls going on. We are able to take a little bit more time. We listen to more than one person typically. We support them in their voice and choice. And then we also are able to provide ongoing or follow-up services, as well as those referrals to needed services. We are also able to focus more on relationship building, not just with the folks that are calling for assistance, but other first responders and community partners and those in the community. So it really opens the door for either the meso or the micro level conflict coaching, in which Ms. Cherise does here at our center. We're also really well equipped with resources from the community. We have great support. We're able to reach out instead of saying, hey, go down to Eastway. We would do more of a, here, let me connect you with Anthony. He works at Eastway and he works with challenges like this. Would you like me to take you there or introduce you? And so it's more of a warm handoff. And then of course, we're reducing the likelihood of a potentially traumatic encounter for some of those calls. And then for our police department, they're benefiting too. So they're not responding to those lower emergent calls, which makes them available for those rapid responses for those higher priority calls. And then if officers are having a moment, not like they have lots of time, but if they're able to take a moment, because typically they're running from Okay, I'm going to a car accident. Let's go over here and do a custody exchange. Oh, shoot. Now we've got a robbery. Back over here to domestic violence. Oh, wait. Now we have a homicide. Oh, and then after that, I need to go take this traffic crash report. So they're all over the place, running around, trying to handle some of these calls. Not having to take some of those lower emergent calls gives them a moment to breathe in between calls, which also assist with morale. Oftentimes, and if you're familiar with how police departments are in the climate that we are in currently, there's a lot of burnout, there's a lot of compassion fatigue, and a lot of folks a lot of officers aren't feeling supported. So this allows for a little bit more time for them to breathe in between things. And then also it allows them more time to address some of those crime patterns that are happening across their jurisdiction, so they can focus on that. But in addition, they're able to focus more on those positive police interactions, positive police community interactions. Let's go play basketball with the kids that are playing in the street that the neighbor's calling on, or let's do a youth camp, or let's do a ride along or something like that. So it allows time and space for those positive police interactions. So there's lots of benefits for many folks. So how do we respond? I'm glad you asked. There's a couple variety of different ways. There's a few ways that people can reach us. Number one, we have a hotline that is designated for the MRU. So we have a line that people are able to call in directly and either inquire about services, solicit services, vent, get some assistance, get connected, or what have you. So they're able to call us directly. The second way that people can reach us is if they call 911 or the non-emergency police number. The dispatcher can do one of two things. They can transfer that call. Oh, I'm sorry that you're dealing with this issue. Hold on just a moment. I'm going to transfer you to MRU, who's going to help you in real time handle the situation. So they'll transfer the call to our call taker. Our call taker will work on, if the person's elevated, let's de-escalate and bring them to a place where they can maybe focus on some moving forward. So that's a possibility. Or if it warrants an in-person response, our call taker will dispatch a team to the scene. The other possibility is if someone calls into 911 or the non-emergency number, a dispatcher will let them know that someone from the MRU will be responding. And what they will do, they will call over the radio and they'll on the computer, they will notify our team that we need to respond to a certain place. Another way that people can obtain our services is sometimes when police officers are on scene, they will either, for whatever reason, they may think, oh, this is better fit for MRU, or I don't have expertise in this area, let's call MRU. So officers on scene are calling over the radio and asking for an MRU unit to assist or to continue on with that call. And it works in a couple of different ways. And then the other piece of that is that someone can walk into our center, or they can be referred from another community partner, and they're able to obtain services that way. So we've got our calls, you can call in, you can come in, we can be dispatched through our 911 and non-police, or we can, when people call us directly. And then we also, as I mentioned before, we do case management and connection and follow-up. So maybe the juvenile and the parent are not getting along, and we separate the parties, we talk to them, kind of figure out what's going on. Our responders come together, kind of analyze, figure out, hey, how are we going to move forward? If the parties are willing to mediate or have that open conversation at that time, then we actually perform those mediations right on scene. People are oftentimes like, mediation, I don't need somebody to tell. No. So we package it all up so it's palatable, and we use words like, Would you like to have a conversation? We could provide that safe space for you to be heard and to kind of work through some of the challenges that are here. When we frame it that way, a lot more people are more willing to engage. So if we're out on the scene and the juvenile and the caregiver are not getting along, the caregiver reports the juvenile's been unruly, off the hook, running away, acting a fool, and the juvenile reports nobody listens to me, they don't care about me, they don't love me, they don't want me to have fun. So we've separated the parties, we've talked to them. Now the parties are ready to mediate. Then we do that mediation right on scene. If we're in a space in which they're still in their crises part and they're not able to get to a place where they're willing or ready to do a mediation, that's okay too. We will leave them information and we'll tell them, hey, you know what? How about we follow up with you in 48 hours and check to see, just check in with you, see how things are going. And if you guys want to do a mediation or have a conversation at that point, we can facilitate that. So we'll either go back out or we'll give them a call and follow up and let them know or decide how they want to move forward, because it's all about that voice and choice. One of the questions is about our hours. We eventually will get to a 24-hour program, but we're not there yet. It's something new. So we currently respond Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. We have, we're actually expanding very shortly. So, and you're probably wondering why 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. So the research that was done over a period of time, all of the call levels, types of calls, times, responses, and all that, it showed that the most appropriate calls for the MRU unit are between the hours of 11 a.m. and 8 p.m. So that's why those hours are such. One of the other things that I didn't talk about, and I like to throw in some examples here and there. For example, loitering would be a very low priority call for our local police department. It might be something that would get answered in a couple of hours. Sometimes the person may not be there when police arrive. So an example is there's a call for loitering that came in. Someone was on a park bench. Someone driving by reported someone laying on a park bench. Our team saw the call and was able to select from the call board and responded to the scene, engaged with the person, had a conversation. They said they weren't feeling well. We were able to get on our radios and dispatch medics to the scene. So we just continued to have that conversation with the person. And after a little time and discussion, it had been discovered that the person had been sexually assaulted. And they were on the bench because they didn't know what to do. They're crying, they're upset, they don't feel well. So we talked to the medics and then we were able to get them transported to the hospital. They were able to get their sexual assault kit and that process was started. That could have been something that either A, it wasn't responded to in a time frame in which the person would be there. So would that person have got the assistance? Would we have asked questions if it were a different response? Would we have been empathetic and provided that safe space for someone to talk about that? I can't say that it wouldn't have happened, but I couldn't say that it would have happened either. So that's an example. We've had neighbor disputes. Oh my stars, neighbors. They are the number one call type currently. And neighbors are off the hook, which I'm sure if you're working in mediation, you've probably seen these types of things. Neighbors fighting over property lines, the trash cans, parking, the dogs, all of those types of things. So we responded to a neighborhood who had several calls for service. And what was happening is kids were playing basketball on the street, but but their basketballs would always go in some of the flower beds of the folks that were living there, messing up flowers, and then they go and trample through the flowers, and it was really making people angry. And there was this whole big uproar in the neighborhood about basketballs and flowers, and then it escalated to other things. So we respond out there, we talk to the different parties involved, and we noticed that there was a basketball hoop in the backyard or in the back area. So we inquired, like, hey, why we're not using why we're not using this basketball hoop? And the kids were like, well, we don't have a net. Oh, is that the only reason? Yeah. Okay. So MRU gets in a little vehicle, drives down the street, buys a $10 net, comes back and hangs it up. We have had 0 complaints out of that neighborhood since that time. So sometimes it can be what we would say are simple fixes, and other times they're deeply rooted in other things. We've had neighbor complaints, noise complaints. You're thinking, really? Oh, listen, we went on a call in which someone had reported that there was a potential, it said that the rooster had been cock-a-doodle-dooling, or whatever they do, since dawn. And they believe that there's a cockfighting ring going on. Interesting call, but okay. This is in our very new days of MRU. So we go out to the scene, we knock on the door, the guy comes out, he's ready to go. Who are you? What do you want? Well, so just told him a little bit about what we're doing. He immediately, you could see his hands, they were all clenched, and he was in that kind of fight, flight, or flight kind of thing. His hands became relaxed, his body language changed, those shifts that you see in mediation when they're going from that weak and self-absorbed to, oh, something else is going on over here. So he brought himself down, spoke with him, talked to him, and he said that there's been an ongoing neighbor dispute. Usually people are pulling guns on each other. So of course we thanked them for not bringing out the guns. That was great. And then he ended up showing us what was going on in the backyard. He's actually breeding roosters. There was no sign of any cockfight ring or any of that going on. So we talked to them, talked with the neighbors, and kind of they worked through some of the challenges that they had, and we were able to move on. So those are examples. Juvenile calls, lots and lots. I had mentioned group homes. So we have an overabundance of group homes in our area. If you're not familiar with group homes, they're pretty big money makers these days. So we have a lot of what happened last summer is we had an exponential number of calls to group homes, and we were noticing there were some things that we should not be calling the police on these youth when they're escalated. We should gotta figure out how to de-escalate and work through the challenge, right? But that isn't what was happening. And our police department noticed, our fire department noticed, MRU noticed, our juvenile system was noticing. So we put our heads together. I called a meeting. Hey, let's get all these parties at the table. Let's figure out what's going on here. And we're currently in a process to, at the community level, to make these changes for group homes. So number one, they're undertrained. They have no idea how to handle some of these at-risk youth. So why not offer some training? Next month, we're putting on a summit for all of our local group homes and doing de-escalation training, working with at-risk youth, trauma-informed care and response, and kind of enveloping the group homes into that. And then we're also doing individual trainings with group homes on other topics that are beneficial for their staff, and really working on how do we bring this youth that's escalated because their visitation got canceled, or because their caregiver told them that they never want to talk to them or have anything to do with them again. And now, because they have no healthy coping skills, now they're off the hook because they don't know how to cope with the information that has been given to them. So we're really honing in. We have this whole big working group focused on group homes and how we can better serve them so that there are less calls putting our juveniles in the system. So that's been great. We've identified challenges with our domestic violence protocol, and in that some of the agencies weren't working together well. Okay, well, great that you're not working together well, but we're focused on the victims and how do we help them despite all of the challenge you all have going on. So we're actually currently in that process of revising and trying to figure out how we can better serve domestic violence victims. Just to make sure that this is clear, we do not respond initially to domestic violence calls for domestic violence. If you know anything about policing, traffic stops and domestic violence calls are two of the deadliest calls for officers. So we do not respond in that manner. But a lot of times the police after they've been on scene, they've assessed, and the threat has dissipated, or someone's been arrested, or what have you, then they'll ask for MRU, because maybe the victim doesn't want to talk to them. So they'll ask for us to go in and chat with them. We do kind of a needs assessment, figure out what it is they need and any follow-up. And we kind of work with victims through that system. So it's kind of unique opportunity for us to reach. So the big question is, do we respond to mental health calls? And the answer to that is yes and no and no and yes. So our primary focus is not mental health. However, mental health challenges affect about 25% of the US population. It's embedded in every piece of the work that we do. So oftentimes there are mental health challenges when we get to a scene, or someone discloses something, or there's something going on. So while that's not our primary focus, we do have 4 clinicians on the team that are equipped and trained. All of our folks are equipped and trained, but have specialty in those mental health calls. So we have been taking more and more of those to eliminate a potential deadly encounter or harmful encounter with those who may not be so have that expertise. So the answer is yes and no and yes. That's not our primary focus, but we do take those calls, and we do work with folks that are having mental health challenges as well. I talked about, we have a hotline. This is our direct hotline that people can call in and reach one of us. Some of the things thus far, cute little transition. Some of the program highlights were first in nation mediation-based alternative response. We launched in May. Accurate now, but as of when this PowerPoint was made, there were over 2,100 hours in the field, over 1,800 calls for service that have been responded to thus far. One of the things that came up is that one side of our city was going to need more MRU than the other side. So we did a little analysis. This is an older one, but our most recent one as of last week proves to be about the same. It's actually broken up pretty evenly across the city. So this isn't something that's on one side or the other. This is something that's needed across the entire city of Dayton. These are kind of old stats, but still in the top 5 are neighbor troubles, disorderly subjects, welfare checks, police officer or peace officer requests. Those are those custody exchanges or property exchanges, and juvenile complaints. So we're still in that same, those top 5, 6 types of calls are still about the same. So that's what it looks like as far as the types of calls. The impact, oh yeah, well, here's some pictures of great. This is the basketball net that we hung up. This is the rooster that was part of the cockfight ring. This is a kitty that we rescued. You're rescuing another cat. Don't laugh. Rescuing this cat that's way up here, if you can't see that. This was a neighbor dispute. So all over this cat that decided to retreat to the team. We've assisted, we've got lots of callback. Can you imagine having such a great experience? You actually call back to 911 or the hotline to tell them, hey, thank you for doing a great job. That's what's happening. That is what is happening. So we support people where they're at. The most important piece to understand, so if you're familiar with community mediation and in the mediation conflict theories and all of those things, if you can't get someone to a place where they can have a conversation, it's probably not going to work. If you're familiar with neurobiology of trauma or neurobiology, and you know that when people are in crisis mode, they're in that survival part of their brain. They're in mediation, we say they're in the red. They're not able to think logically because they're in that survival brain, that survival piece, that initial crisis stage. Until we can work with them to get a shift from red to blue, or from survival brain to thinking brain, it's not going to work. So in our center, we are seeing people after the initial crises. They still may be somewhat in crises, but that initial crises has happened. And now we're at the center, and they're in a more of a place because it's scheduled, or they've walked in, or the parties, or what have you. So they're more in a place where they can think, and they can go from that weakness to that strength. Okay. So when you're taking mediation out into the community, you have to first recognize that your first crisis responders, once you've worked through whatever crisis is happening, and remember, there are all kinds of crises and compound kind of things that happen. Once you get them through that piece, then we can have the conversation. And that's how it works out in the field. First, you got to deal with the crises, get them to a space where they can have a conversation. And so that's why a lot of times mediations may not happen the first time we respond. It may be something that we do on a follow-up, or something that they call and schedule in. So it looks a little bit differently. But we really have to focus in on getting someone when they're in that weak and self-absorbed piece. Me, I feel, I hate, you did, you that, and get them to that place where they're, well, they came at me because, that makes sense. Well, I didn't know that. Well, you didn't say that, or I didn't hear that. So it gets them to that place of recognition. And then once you get to recognition, then they get that little spark of empowerment. And then they're getting to that, okay, well, that makes sense. Well, I can do this. How about this? I'll take my dog out at 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. if you can make sure that between 1 and 3, your kids aren't coming over into my yard putting trash, or something similar. Insert whatever conflict is going on. Oh, well, yeah, we've been fighting for 6 years about child custody or visitation, or parent 1 being liberal and parent 2 being conservative, and we've been going at this. Oh, now we're in a space where we can have that conversation. So it's amazing in the field. I know in the center, when we do mediations, you see those shifts. I think the shifts are even more noticeable when you're in the field and you're going from crises to more of a crisis resolution type of stage. We do have the potential to expand. We are actually, it's great because the officers, like we're riding down the street, they'll pull it, hey, when are you guys getting more of you? Or, hey, can you, I went to this house last week and I wasn't real sure how it was do you think you guys could follow up and check in? They're asking for us. They are asking for more of us. Our chief of police is very supportive, as well as our dispatch center and all of the working partners that went into formulating the MRU. They've been great. They've been our one question, or one thing that I didn't point out, is that about 4.5% of calls, so many people want to know about that. Well, how many are you having to send back to police, and why? So about 4.5% to 5% of calls have been transferred back to the police, but it has been for either A, the person has reported a crime of violence, so there needs to be a police report, or other reasons, including police. They typically have to do with a police report. We do reports, but sometimes when it comes to those criminal things, they need a police report. And what is the other reason? We've had a couple of calls in which weapons have been involved. It wasn't identified right away, but it was identified once on scene. Now, we're not going to say, oh, hey, we're checking out. There's a process that we're able to do that and make sure that everyone is safe. So we have some recommendations to start. Even in our time, we're trying to add a couple more teams. We're doing a data analysis to discover, or to determine which way we will go as far as expansion. And then, of course, we want to know the higher level impact, because we have all of those key performance indicators, but we're working with we're currently working to with a couple of research groups that are going to come in and do a little bit more in-depth analysis of the program. Oh yeah, and then community feedback. So I'm going to stop sharing because I want to see if there are any questions. It's really, really a privilege to be in this space. If you, bios aren't important, but I come from, I started out my career in law enforcement, and then I moved to social work. And then this is like putting both of those together. Like, how much better can it get, right? Like how much more awesome could it be to bring those two worlds together? So it's been great. The community has been very receptive. People, can't believe how many times you show up on scene and we're trying, hey, get in here and help me, blah, blah, blah. I can't deal with this. I can't handle this anymore. So people are really willing and ready for someone to come and help them. And it's great to have an alternative type of response to do that. So I will open it up for questions.
Hey, Raven, there were, I saw a couple of questions in there just to catch them really quick. One on do our volunteers do the MRU response? And then the other one was about dealing with spouse abuse. So those are two questions that caught my eye.
Great, I'm pulling it up right now. So volunteers do not respond in the community. Our volunteers are for our center-based things, and there's liability and all kinds of different things that go into that. So our volunteer mediators don't do that, but oftentimes our volunteer mediators are doing the mediations that are happening after the fact and not on scene and are done here at our center. Great question about an aggressive encounter. Let me tell you a story. It's going to happen. Oh, I guess I didn't talk about training for our mediators. So let me do that, and then I'm going to get into that question about aggressive encounter. So training, we have a 12-week training academy. It started out as 6, went to 8, and now it's at 12, which is good. That means they're getting more comprehensive training. So we do defensive tactics and situational awareness with our local police department. And that is, we are unarmed. And if things go wrong, we need to be able to get out of a situation. So those are important, but we also have our law department come in. We're not attorneys. We do not give legal advice. But if someone's calling about a parking complaint or a noise complaint, and they're like, well, it says it has to be 2 feet from this, we have to know that information, or how can we work through the situation if we don't have that information? So our law department comes in. We have folks from the LGBTQ community come in and talk about working with folks from our LGBTQ community. We have folks from the mental health professional come in and do mental health first aid, talk about suicide assessment, the ASSIST, if you're familiar with the ASSIST program, suicide risk assessment. We have folks from our deaf and hard of hearing community. How do we work with our deaf and hard of hearing folks? We have a limited English proficiency protocol. So if the person's primary language, Dayton is the city of refugees and immigrants. So there's all kinds of languages going on. That is not a barrier that we want people to have. We want to eliminate that barrier. So we have a great way of addressing that. We have, we make our team ride along with the police. They ride along with fire and EMS so they can get different perspectives of what first response looks like. We have our 40-hour plus mediation training in which we do mediations. We shadow mediations, we co-lead, we lead, we do all of those different things. We have an apprenticeship program. It's a whole program so that everyone is receives their mediation certification too. We have someone come in and talk about human trafficking, sexual violence, working in the domestic violence field. So we have a plethora and 12 weeks of lots of training, scenario-based training. We work with our local police department and our VA police department, because they have this great simulator that we go out and utilize for training. So there's lots and lots of training. So that goes into the question about aggressive encounter. So listen, people, you got to be aware. Being aware, situationally aware, is of utmost importance. You always want to know where these are, and you always want to know where a potential weapon. I've been in homes where there's been 70 knives out, and I felt safe as could be. And then I've been in a home where, man, they could probably use that chair and knock me out, but we're going to try this kind of thing. So we definitely have to be situationally aware of everything and everyone, and be ready, kind of be on your toes, because you never know when something can pop up. I went to a call, should have known this was not going to go well. It was a peace officer call, and it was between, when I arrived on scene, recognized it was between two sisters. I was talking to one sister, the other sister was in the house with the door locked, not letting this person. So I'm talking to this person. I'm like, all right, let's go talk to the other party. And then out of nowhere, the sister one comes out with a baseball bat. Well, let's talk about this. So while we're not directive, because that's not how mediation works, when you're on a scene and someone pulls out a baseball bat, you got to figure it out, right? So the first, she starts beating on the person's car and busting up the car, and then she goes and is busting up the screen door. So at one point I'm like, okay, what we're doing isn't working. So then I'm like, I'm gonna use your name, Cherise, okay? I'm like, Cherise, is this working? And they're like, well, is it working? And of course, there's no. Okay, how can we talk about something else that may be more beneficial? Because we don't want police to come, because that would be a whole nother situation. So what are we doing? And it took a minute, but they came down. They came out of that real high level and high intensity crisis moment. So we're situationally trained. We have to always be on our P's and Q's. One thing is, the biggest pushback was, this is literally what people told me the first week I worked in this job. You're going to get killed. Great. Thanks for having confidence in me. However, if things go wrong, we have protocols and things in place to utilize. In addition, we're on the same radio and computer system. This little orange button on my radio, it will send the whole force. And this happens. So the story I'll share with you is, my partner and I were called for a disorderly subject. There was a man with an umbrella tattoo in the yard screaming. That's the description we got. So we roll through the neighborhood. We don't see anyone. Okay, but we ask a couple neighbors, hey, you see anything going on? No. So we go up to the house. The lady's calm as a cucumber. She's like, my husband's talking to him in the backyard. So first thing is, she said backyard, that's a different type of call. That's a trespassing or potential burglary or what have you. So keep that in mind. She's like, hey, come, you could just walk through the house. Well, she had this big dog, so we had to have her put the dog up. So we come around through the living room into the kitchen, and I noticed a gun holster that was empty, clue number 1. And then I noticed some ammo, clue number 2. And then I come around the island of the kitchen, and there's a man holding another man at gunpoint. In my head, okay, well, this isn't a call for us, but we're here. We're gonna figure this out. So he has the gun, and I'm like, luckily the lady identified who her husband was, because I wouldn't know, right? So he's holding this guy at gunpoint who's about 10 steps down from him. And I'm like, oh, so I immediately acknowledge, oh, there's a gun. Okay, we're going to need an officer. And he's like, the older man is like, help me. And I'm like, I want you to stay right where you are. So I get on the phone and I'm like, we need an officer, or not phone, the radio. We need an officer on a hurry up. But I don't want to freak anyone out, because listen, I got soccer to go home to. I need to go home today, right? So I'm like, sir, I want you to stay just as you are. Do not move. In the meantime, my partner and I are getting the lady out of the house to the front, and I have to get to a place where I can tell police that there's a gun, right? So we get out, and then I'm on the radio, and I'm like, hey, there's one at gunpoint in the backyard. listen, I knew within 30 seconds the whole force is going to show up. So then what I did was my partner stayed with the lady. We have to maintain sight, stayed with her. So I go into the kitchen and I'm like, sir, I need you to understand the police are coming. They're coming in hot. They're going to be very, very fast acting. Just do whatever it is that they tell you to do. And I tell the guy that's being held at gunpoint, do not move. And sure enough, in 30 seconds, 47 officers show up. And that's where hey, the guy with the gun is the homeowner. So, you know, you got to give him as much information. And it worked out. Was it an ideal situation? No, but perspective is everything. Remember, children's services, victim services, health officers, housing officers, parking folks. There's all kinds of folks working into the community, responding to homes, and they're unarmed. The only difference is this is an alternative. This is something new to policing. So that's the perspective that we like to tell people. Yes, we're unarmed, but it isn't unique. There's all kinds of folks that respond in the community and are unarmed. It just looks different because it has to do with an alternative policing unit. So keeping that in mind, we're heavily trained. We get continuing training, defensive tactics, situational awareness, and continuing that our folks get evaluated periodically to make sure that they're still paying attention and they don't get complacent in what they do.
And Raven,
So,
I wanted to add into that training that the MRU gets is that this is really where for us transformative conflict theory is really powerful, because we are paying attention to the conflict interaction dynamics. And there's that same language when I'm in crisis, because that conflict is destabilizing to me. What's happening to me is pissing me off. You know, it's really upsetting. There's some overlap to that. And so I think for us, the transformative conflict theory, what's happening to people when they're in conflict, is a great message. So one of the things, not only that we'll be doing in terms of analysis of the effectiveness of the program, is also it gives us an opportunity to connect some theories, because the de-escalation, the neurobiology of trauma, bringing in trauma-informed principles, I think strengths-based social work practice, motivational interviewing. These are all things that are very compatible with transformative conflict theory. And I'm particularly interested in that nexus or intersection, because I think that that's really what has allowed us to bring Raven and her expertise in and help shape this model. So I wanted to add that in. Someone asked about the annual budget for this. I think we're almost at $1 million. Is it that high?
1.2 million. And let me be very clear that we are not a defund the police program. This is something that the city said that they were going to do, and they put money behind it. So we have it comes from our general fund from the city. And then we also have some grants that we have as well. So funding looks a little bit different. And that's what a lot of the cities are doing, or putting it in their city budget.
I wonder, I know our time is kind of ending. I wondered if we wanted to open it up to everyone. I know there's questions in the chat, but I just wanted to check in and see if we wanted to open that up at all to people, or just keep taking the questions off the chat.
If anybody wants to hop in with a raised hand or spontaneously.
Sure. Just to answer a couple of the questions, Narcan, yes, we do carry Narcan and we're trained to utilize that. Sometimes people do decline services. It's all about voice and choice, all about voice and choice. So if they are like, no, we'll kind of explain like how we do things and how it might differ, and how they may be waiting for a few hours for police response, but it's all about their voice and choice. Although we're not directive, typically, if we have to be directive, we can be, and we have the same authority as any of our other first responders to make that happen. And then I think there was a recruitment question. So we did a great job of trying to recruit members that look like the communities that we serve. So we did a fine job. We reached out, of course, the city puts out their things, but we also reached out to like our Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, all of our HBCUs, local social work programs and such to make sure that we were getting a diverse group of applicants and people that would be qualified for the position. Our typical response time, I think it's 20 minutes, could be 15. Don't quote me on that. Anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes. And an average call takes about an hour. Some of them are short and sweet. And then others, we may spend quite a long time on it. So.
I think Colonel has his hand up.
Go for it.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It's exciting stuff. So right now in Richmond, Virginia, we don't even have a mediation center at all. There's plenty of mediators in and around the city, but there's no like center that's coordinating anybody's efforts. So I was wondering, is that something essential, or is there a way for it where we could plant the seeds for a program like yours in lieu of a mediation center?
Great question. I don't have a specific answer for you. However, there are some programs that develop it into the city's public safety department. So if there's not a mediation department, some cities have created a whole branch within their public safety department that has been beneficial and done it that way.
I think Madison has it in their fire, through their fire department, I believe.
Yeah.
There was a great question on confidentiality in the field on these.
Yes. So obviously mediation is covered under the mediation, well, in Ohio, it's covered under our Mediation Act, so confidentiality. Plus we have some licensed folks on here that have to maintain but everything's confidential. We don't put, like, our reports are not public. You have to request, you have to sign an ROI in order for that information to be released. Now, because we work on the same computer and radio system as police, there is some information that is public. For example, we respond to a neighbor dispute and we talk to both parties and mediate it, okay? So what we'll put in the police system is MRU responded, spoke with both parties, mediation performed on scene, follow-up 24 hours. That's it. And then in our mediation reports, we get a little bit more detailed and the information and such, because some of that, public doesn't need to know that, because this is a private confidential conversation. So that's how we're able to maintain that confidentiality. And the police, oh, right. I think a couple of people may have asked, budget. Oh, if you want to get a program started, you have to have the key parties at the table. You have to have buy-in. And the way that if you're familiar with setting up community programs, you have to have the buy-in. So you first figure out who should be at the table, get them to the table, have the conversation and start on that. One of the things when I first started, they had the idea was developed, there were things going on. And I said, my first question was, who has talked to the patrol officers? They kind of looked at me like I was crazy. I'm like, no, like, really? Well, I was like, if we don't talk to patrol officers, this is never going to work. So my first week on the job, we got into all of the roll calls for the police department. And I went in there, wouldn't you know, none of them had a darn clue about what was going on. So I talked to them, hey, this is what we're doing. This is how we see it. I answered their questions. That's when we got some interesting feedback, but I told them before we launch this program, I'm coming back to talk to you and tell you how it works. So 2 weeks before we launched the program, I came back, talked to all of the roll calls and told them, hey, this is how it works. This is how it's going to go. I told them, I'm going to come back in 3 months and I'm gonna figure out how it's going. Give me some feedback. I went back in 3 months, talked to them. They were giving us suggestions, telling us, very grateful. And then actually I told them I would come back in 6 months. So next week, we're starting those roll calls again. And now we have a plethora of information, and I'm excited. We're doing little surveys to get their feedback too. I cannot wait. So we have to have that relationship building on the ground, but we also have to have that relationship building at the macro, whatever you want to call it, the community level as well, because you got to have the buy-in to get the money, to get the people to make it happen, but you also have to get the on the ground folks so that we're collaborating and pushing it back and forth. That kind of thing.
And this, just to add to that, this program has deepened our relationship with the Dayton Police. We've always had a generally good partnership or relationship with the Dayton Police, going out to their roll calls prior to the MRU. And we've been able to establish the relationship with, the chief of police through the years. But like Raven has been talking about, it really is important to make sure that funnels down to the officers on the street. So this really just kind of exponentially expands and deepens our relationship with the Dayton Police, who just do I think a terrifically wonderful job. And going out on these calls, in the beginning, it really has helped me kind of really appreciate what they're doing because of the situational awareness, that training that we need. So those partnerships with the community and with the police in particular, I think have been really helpful to us to be where we are. We've been a program since 1987. And so for a long time, that saying about us is we're the best kept secret in Dayton, and we don't want to be the best kept secret, right? And so there's that continual effort to build relationships within the community. And so now to be able to literally go out to the community more, and for the community see our mediation cars. And I had on my mediation jacket the other day. It was going to pick up lunch, and the woman ahead of me in the checkout line said, "Oh yeah, you guys came out and helped us. Thank you." And so that's really what we want. We're part of the community. We're in the community. And I think that the community has spoken. And what's really wonderful for our community leaders, at least that I think, is that we're really trying to listen to the community and help create the best community for everyone. So it's really been neat to have Raven's leadership in helping us create this program. We also had support from Dignity Best Practices, which is the consultant that was brought in by the city to help look at an alternative response. And they're the ones that said, "Hey, you've got this mediation center. What is this?" And so that's why we actually have a unique program, because the consultants at Dignity Best Practice, you can just put in Dignity Best Practice and their website will come up. That's really where the innovation has come from, because they've recognized that there's something very valuable that's already in the community that could really help people provide for us to offer an alternative response. So it's just been really fantastic to be on this journey together with Raven and her team, and our team as a collective center, but also the community as well. It's just been really fantastic. And I'll put that
and I cannot end without making sure that we give a shout out to the American Arbitration Association for funding. They're one of our grant funders to get this program started and hopefully to expand in this program. So cannot eliminate or forget to give them a shout out as well. So it's been great working with them. Hey, listen, this is new, it's innovative, it's great, it's exciting. Who knows? And in programs that are intended for great impact, it's going to take decades to see that. We're changing systems that have been in place for decades, and we're moving toward a different response. And it's scary and great and exciting all at the same time. But when you have the opportunity to help one person, and this is what my responders will say, when I ask them, why are you here? If we help one person today, Raven, we're good. And that's really where it's all at.
Absolutely. And I'm excited, we're setting in motion some program evaluation, and the challenges of doing, rigorous evidence-based program evaluation. It's critically necessary. And one of the things I mentioned earlier is that I'm really excited about pushing forward transformative theory, because what's the theory of change that we're really looking at here? Why do we do what we do out in the field? And so Raven's expertise that she's brought is really helping us take this practice of community-based mediation really out and expanding it and growing it. And I think that, at the root of that is really how we show up and understand what people are dealing with. And so we always ask, what does conflict mean to people? And what do people say that they need? If we don't start there, and what people always say about their conflict experiences, this conflict really challenges me to be my best self and think my best thinking. And so, as Raven talked about, the de-escalation, as we think about it, really is, we through our words and our presence can really help people begin to speak to what's going on with them and really shift literally in their brain, right? Out of fight and flight, out of survivor into their thinking brain, and that links with their heart. And it's this full, and we see it out in the field, when we're doing that work, just as much as we see it in the mediation room. And so that's what I think ultimately is that we're doing with this project here, this program, this movement, whatever you want to call it, is we're really showing up in a way that's helpful to people, and it's helping them navigate a really difficult conflict situation. And so we're just really honored. I'll let Raven have the closing words here, but we're really just honored to do this work. We've been part of the community for 35 years, and to be able to get deeper into the community and really serve the community. And the police are part of the community. Our community members are part of the community. Everybody is a part of the community. And, Dayton, like many other urban centers, has its challenges. And by golly, before the pandemic, we had tornadoes hit City of Dayton for the first time in my lifetime that I can remember. We had the KKK come do a rally. We had a mass shooting happen in 2019, and then we had the pandemic, and boom, the community said, hey. And then George Floyd happened, and boom, here we are now with the Mediation Response Unit under the leadership of Raven and our director, Michelle, and this whole community of transformative practitioners are really helping us really do this powerful work. So it's a pure honor to do this work, and it's a pure honor to have Raven with us and have her on our team and helping us really lean in and give the community what they say they need.
That was a great summation, Cherise. That was a great summation. I don't have anything on that except for, hey, if your city is thinking about doing something, or you're thinking about presenting it to your city to do something, you're welcome to reach out for information, questions. If you didn't get your question answered, shoot me an email or something. But great to see all of you doing good work in your communities, and how much more we can make, how much bigger of an impact we can make when we all put it together. So thank you.
Thank you so much. This has been fabulous. And to see what we can do with the processes of our field is just so rewarding, so amazing. And I also want to note that Tracy Frisch is on the call, or was on the call. I don't know if she's on now, from AAAICDR Foundation, which funds the MRU and is also one of our funders of the CUNY Dispute Resolution Center. And we have to thank our funders for helping to make a lot of our projects possible. With that, we are going to turn off the recording, officially end the recorded part of the breakfast, roundtable breakfast. And Cherise and Raven, do you have a few minutes to hang around if anyone has any informal questions?
Sure.
All
Let's
right, I'm
say that
stopping the
we'll be-
recording now. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's say that we'll stay on no later than 10:15 if anyone has any questions. But one of the questions that's been coming up is whether you're going to make the PowerPoint available, or if you can make it available.
I can send it. Would you like for me to send it